knees over toes or vertical shin, squatting. I'm not attacking Matt Wenning for, just don't misinterpret this. But Matt Wenning made this comment about how, he met Chad Vaughn, and Chad Vaughn has knee problems, and Matt doesn't have knee problems. And so he thinks that the reason why he doesn't have knee problems is because he always squatted with a vertical shin, and the reason why Chad has knee problems is because of the knees over toes. And I just want to point out that I think the real issue with Chad's knees, much like many weightlifters, is actually the repeated impacts. If you look at, the clean, the snatch, the jerk, there's this violent impact that occurs whenever you lift. And very quickly, I just want to make a point here as something to compare. If you look at Liu Xiaojun, not sure if I even pronounce his name correctly, he doesn't do that whole stomp thing. His feet stay planted, and he isn't like violently hitting the ground. And so when you watch him snatch, his feet stay in the same position. His feet barely even leave the ground. In fact, they just kind of slide a little. When he cleans, same thing. And of course, he squat jerks instead of split jerking. And so, when you watch a squat jerk, his feet don't even move. Talk about longevity in a sport. Liu has been around forever. And I think that the reason why Liu lasted so long is because he doesn't have that violent impact. If you look at the data, most of the medalists in weightlifting are around 25. Very rarely do you see anyone over the age of 35 competing in Olympic weightlifting, and yet, Liu seems to have this unbelievable longevity. And I do believe that that is because of the fact that, unlike other lifters, he is very, it's just beautiful. It's just finesse. He's just so smooth, and it isn't this violent stomping thing. And so I'm going to just comment here that I don't think Matt's comparison is an accurate comparison, because you're not comparing a powerlifter to a powerlifter. You're comparing a powerlifter to a weightlifter. And weightlifting is a very violent sport if you think about the repeated impacts. So that's just the first thing I want to get out of the way here. If you were to squat with your knee passing over your toe and you weren't doing weightlifting, so, let's just say that you're entirely powerlifting, I do not believe that this would cause any additional knee stress or harm to your knees. The reason for this is because of, things adapt. So if you constantly have the same pattern all the time, and you are very good at using the same pattern, the connective tissues will get stronger. It's just the way things are. It's kind of like the whole thing of, like, you look at gymnasts, and gymnasts have an ability to do an iron cross, but you can't. It would probably tear your shoulder out of socket. Even if you had the strength to do it, you don't have the connective tissue strength to do it. And so it's my belief that if you were to always squat with the same pattern, whether it's a vertical knee or the knee over toe, I think that either way, the connective tissue would just get stronger over time. And so both of them would be relatively equal. This is just the principle of, specific adaptations, right? If you always do this same movement, your body adapts to that pattern. You'll notice that many of the Chinese weightlifters, who, I'm speaking about them because they are such amazing squatters, have knee valgus when they squat. This is not an issue, though, because they've developed those tissues over time. When we look at different sports and different athletes, Many people can get into certain positions that, the average person could not get into. And it's because they have strengthened those tissues through, years and years of practice. And so, the takeaway here is, does the vertical shin protect your knee, or does the knee over toe protect your knee? And I would argue that both of them are equal. However, if you've always squatted with a vertical shin and then you start squatting knee over toe, you probably will feel pain. And conversely, if you've always squatted knee over toe and then suddenly you start trying to practice vertical shin, you'll have knee pain. So no one ever taught me how to squat. I just had to figure it out on my own. And I didn't go to like a starting strength seminar or something, right? And so I've always squatted knee over toe because I played hockey. And so, you squat deep and this is just how it's done. No one ever makes a comment about not putting your knee over your toe. I know lots of you were told that at some point in time. Don't let your knees go past your toes. But if you play hockey, when you skate, if you skate properly, you know that your knee should be well past the front of your skate. Your knee should be over your toe. We would do this thing where you actually flex your ankle and you take your stick and put your stick vertical, and you want your knee to be at least, an inch, if not 2 inches over the toe. And so whenever you squat or lunge or any other leg movement, we purposely push our knee over our toe because that's the same position that you would skate in. And so I have always squatted knees over toes. No one ever told me not to, okay? But I started experimenting with things like low bar and box squats and stuff like that, and trying to squat with a vertical shin. And sure enough, I had knee pain. That's because vertical shin is bad, right? No. It's because I have always squatted knees over toes. And so now when I start doing a different movement pattern, that's why it causes pain. Not because vertical shin is bad. It's because I haven't adapted to that. I don't have, 30 years of squatting with a vertical shin. And so just changing the pattern is the reason why there's pain. This is kind of like with bench press. You guys who follow me know that I rarely bench press. But when I do bench press, you'll notice that I never, ever use a wide grip. I don't use the competition grip. I don't use a wide grip. I always have a close grip. And I'm not a power lifter, okay? And so I always trained the bench press for the sake of just training strength. And so I always used the same grip that I use for an overhead press. I don't use the bench press as a competition lift. I'm not trying to bench the most amount of weight. I'm using the bench press as an accessory movement to build strength. And so my grip is relatively narrow. It's the same grip I use to do overhead presses. And therefore, that's the pattern that I got used to. But, because I experiment, I tried doing some what's called competition grip, which to me seems super wide. And sure enough, I had all this pain in my shoulders and I had pain in my pec, and it didn't feel right. Why? Well, because, for the last 20 years, I've been doing close grip. So, when you suddenly change your grip, it doesn't feel right. It's kind of like if you've always done overhead presses and then suddenly you start trying to do behind the neck presses, you're probably going to have pain. But I've been doing behind the neck presses for 20 years, so, more than 20 years. Jeez, God, I'm old. And so behind the neck presses don't hurt because I have that range of motion. I develop those tissues over time. And so, the takeaway that I want you to have from this video, if you've made it this far through it, is that whatever pattern you choose, let's say you always squat low bar and you keep a vertical shin, that is the pattern that you have developed and strengthened and reinforced. If you suddenly change things, you are going to need to be very mindful of how much loading you do and how you do it. Just because you can squat, 365 high bar with knees over toes because your muscles are strong enough, doesn't necessarily mean that you've developed the connective tissue capacity to do that without irritating it. Conversely, if you've always squatted knees over toes and now you suddenly switch to a low bar, you can probably squat a lot of weight low bar and probably squat more weight low bar. However, you don't have the connective tissue. So even though your muscles are strong enough, you're going to notice that your quad tendons and your patellar tendons flare up almost immediately. So the very next day, you're like, oh shit, what did I do? My tendons hurt like hell. And it's like, yeah, your tendons hurt like hell because you did something that you haven't done. And so it's this new stress. And so my point to you, and this isn't just about squatting, this is literally everything, whether it's bench pressing, overhead pressing, deadlifting, etc. If you suddenly change things, you are going to irritate the connective tissues. And so you need to be very mindful of that and work up to something. So I'll give you a recent example. I've been trying to figure out why John Hack can squat so much weight, and so I've been playing around with my squat to try to mimic his technique. In order to do this, I have been squatting an empty barbell most of the time, because when I put load on the bar, it hurts. The joints hurt. The connective tissue hurts. I have the strength. It's not a muscle issue. The connective tissue hurts if I go heavy. And so until you ingrain that pattern and slowly rebuild that pattern, your connective tissue is going to be the limiting factor, not the muscle strength. And so you have to be very mindful of that because of the fact that it takes, I've heard this, and I don't know if this is true, but I've heard repeatedly that it takes 10 times longer for connective tissue to adapt than it does for a muscle to adapt. You know, if you do a ton of leg extensions, hamstring curls, leg presses, hack squats, etc., all this machine work, you probably have very adequate strength in your legs. But now when you go to do a barbell back squat, you haven't developed the connective tissue. So, you know, just having strength in a muscle doesn't necessarily mean that the movement is a good movement for you. We have to be very cautious about how we load the connective tissue. And I'm sure that all of you are aware of this. I mean, tendon ruptures and stuff like that, those things happen. And it's my belief that those things happen whenever we load a tendon in a range of motion or a movement pattern or an angle or torque or whatever word you want to use here that we haven't been using for a long period of time. And that's why I think for a lot of people, I've seen this happen many times. People will try to change their squat form or change their deadlift form or change their bench press form, and they get injured. And they go, oh, see, that's a bad form. And that, you know, the reason I got injured is because that's wrong. And I don't believe that to be true. I think what it is that you had the muscle strength to perform that movement, but you didn't take the time to develop the connective tissue. And so that's what I wanted to share here. I'm hoping that this will help you prevent injuries. Only progress at the rate at which your connective tissue can handle. So, you know, you have 600-pound quads, but you have, you know, a 300-pound quad tendon. So maybe don't put 600 pounds on the bar. And you need to be very methodical at loading things. And this is why I often hold athletes back. You know, there are lots of times where someone will hit a PR, they hit a big PR, and I know that they have more in them because they moved it so fast. And so instead of letting them go up in weight, I'll have them train at that same load and maybe just try to add reps for a while. Is this limiting the rate at which they get stronger? Probably yes. But is this also avoiding, you know, a tendon rupture? Also probably yes. So it's like, you know, we've had some guy running, you know, some squat program, and he's been doing, you know, fours, and suddenly, you know, we decide that we're gonna test out because he's coming up to a meet or something, and you know, he hits a big PR, and it's like, oh wow, that's a huge PR for them. And it's like, let's be smart about this and not go for more. Let's stay at that weight and add reps. And I mean, I've done it myself. There's been times where, you know, I was like, I'm going to test my 1 rep max today. And I purposely put 10 pounds more on the bar than I did before. So, you know, I'm going for a 10-pound PR. And it goes so easy, I end up doing a double. Now, if I can do a double, obviously I could have put more weight on the bar. But I won't, because 10 pounds is enough. And so then I'm like, okay, well, that's a 10-pound increase, and I did it for a double. So I know that my 1 rep max went up even more than 10 pounds. I don't need to test it to prove it to myself. But I am getting smarter as I get older, because a young me would have been like, I'm going to put another 10 pounds on the bar. And now I'm like, nope, 10 pounds is enough. I know that my 1 rep max has gone up. I know that this program is working. And so I'm not going to push the weight any further, because I don't want to exceed the capacity of the connective tissues. So I hope this is helpful. I hope it helps you prevent injuries in the future. Like I said, if you change your pattern, you know, if you always squat knees over toes and you switch to vertical shin there, you know, you're going to have pain. You have to develop the connective tissue. And same thing in reverse. If you've always squatted vertical shin and you switch to, you know, knees over toes, you're going to have to develop the connective tissue first.